postgraduate exam also. When Dr. Sangeet Mittal is presenting, Dr. Saurabh Sinha may interrupt in between and ask questions in relation to what will be important for the postgraduates so that we can go slide by slide. The connectivity of Dr. Sangeet Mittal is also good. Dr. Saurabh Sinha is also good, and Pooja Sinha is also good. And in between, if you want to ask any questions, feel free to please ask on the chat box, and Dr. Saurabh Sinha and Dr. Pooja Sinha will moderate it with Dr. Sangeet Mittal. Dr. Saurabh Sinha, please.
Thank you, Sangeet, for a glorious welcome address. I used to do this presentation years ago. Sangeet, give me 1 minute. I'll hand it over to you in 1 minute's time.
Yeah, sure.
All the to all the people attending, I used to have a presentation called "I Feel a Problem." This is 10 years back. Most years just starting off in this part of the world. 10, 12 years back, 14 years back. Sorry, when OCT was not very common, available in every nook and corner. So I used to say, I see a OCT machine. When you see a patient in a medicine ward, you cannot straight away say diagnosis is this, you cannot straight away put a stethoscope. Our teachers taught us that you have to first inspect, then palpate, auscultate, then percuss, and then diagnose. If it is a respiratory case or abdomen case, you ask to inspect. So everything methodically. See, inspect, palpate, percuss, auscultate, all four had to be told. And then you said, because I find this finding and don't find this finding, therefore this is a diagnosis. When we look at the OCT, we say, oh, macular hole, oh, VMT, oh, cystic changes. Not really looking at all the layers carefully. So I've always maintained, if you look at an OCT, which you're not very sure what it is, use the mnemonics, I feel a problem. And I look at the vitreoretinal interface. So look at the interface with the vitreous, see how the macular pushed out, what is happening, contour over there, I think, Then the interface, look at the interface, what is happening. Is an epiretinal membrane, is a double membrane, single membrane, fully attached, partially attached, eye interface. P is the foveal contour. C is the contour normal, abnormal. Is it pushed up, the CNVM, edema, pulled up, and decide accordingly. A is, I feel, is retinal architecture. The inner retina, the outer retina, cystic spaces, interretinal fluid, subretinal fluid, diffuse fluid, all kinds of changings. So many nice words in diabetic retinopathy, all in these OCT biomarkers, drill, HRF. I'm sure Sangeet will get into all those things. Nice terminologies that we have nowadays. ORTs, all these fancy names. But before you get into those fancy names, learn to look at the architecture of the retina properly. So you look at the interface, we'll go to the architecture. And the last one, I feel a problem. The P part is the RPE layer. So when you look at an OCT, look at the interface, look at the foveal contour, look at the architecture, look at the RPE layer. You may have a patient with a CNVM who had cystic changes like CSR before and has an epiretinal membrane also. So if you may have all three pathologies, or we have a simple CNVM also. So one should look at all the layers properly, help diagnose and understand what is happening. I'm sorry, Sangeet, for having taken over the class like that, but Sangeet, please go ahead, and I'm sure we'll all learn a lot from you today.
Thank you, Dr. Saurabh. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Pooja Sinha and Dr. Satyajit Sinha for giving me this chance to present. And I must admit that this is my first time I am taking a PG class. So I may not be very well versed on what to tell and what not to tell. So please feel free to interrupt me anytime. And I'll be very happy to answer the queries. OCT has gone a long way, changed a long way since it was introduced for the management of retinal disease. We had time domain OCTs, and now we have swept source OCTs with OCT angiography systems. So in this presentation, I'll just stick to OCT as concerned to the retinal disease. The glaucoma part, I think the glaucoma, during your glaucoma glaucoma sessions, it will be taken care of, glaucoma and optic nerve. And so I'll just stick to very basics of the OCT, what is the OCT and how to interpret it. So this is, I'm not able to forward the slide. Yes. So OCT basically is a non-contact, non-invasive imaging technique and is used to obtain high resolution cross-sectional images of the and anterior segment, and it measures reflected light from tissue discontinuities. It is similar as is your ultrasound. Ultrasound, what it uses is the sound waves. Sound waves travel through the various tissues, and then they get reflected from various tissues, and then the detector detects the sound waves, their pattern of reflection, and then converts it into a photo signal, which gives us the images of the organs inside. The sound wave has an advantage that it has got a very big bandwidth, and you can go very deep. But in OCT, we use, instead of sound, we use light, and light, it gets reflected from the retinal tissue. Light, the problem is that it has got very small bandwidth, so it cannot highlight the whole from cornea to the posterior segment in one go, but it can only show you small tissues, small diameter, small depth of tissues. That is up to 10 microns it can show, and not beyond that. So it has got its limitations, and so we evaluate only the retina here, and we can't have a full picture of the whole eye through OCT as is possible with the ultrasound. But then the light, because of its speed, it can give you a very high resolution as compared to ultrasound. And this OCT is based on interferometry. We'll come to that subsequently. So briefly, now OCT is like doing a vertical biopsy section of the retina. And so the only other way to get this type of section here, you can see the vitreous, the retina, and the choroid below, will be just to, and you can see all the layers of the retina one by one. And if you want to otherwise see it, you have to take out the eye, cut it with a knife, and then study it under a microscope, and you will be able to see this kind of a picture. But OCT gives you this vertical biopsy section, and instead of knife, light is used. And instead of viewing the section under a microscope, we are presented with false color view with micron level resolution. So the interferometry will give you white and black, white and dark, the bright and dark image only, and not the colored image. The colors, they are introduced by the computer, by the artificial intelligence, and according to the reflectance pattern, the colors that are red, green, and yellow we see on OCT, they are shown by the computer according to the reflectance that is seen in the various layers. The layers of the retina otherwise in the normal scan will be either bright or dark, as is seen in this picture. And there is no physical contact with the eye, so it is a totally non-invasive technique. And that is the main advantage of OCT over other methods of examination of the eye. And the principle of OCT, it lies in the name itself. The principle of the OCT, lies in the name of the OCT only. The OCT stands for optical coherence tomography. And if we take one by one, optical means light, and coherence is a property of monochromatic light where all the waves move uniformly and have constant phase difference. So all the waves that are in the monochromatic light, they are of the same wavelength, and they move in a same fashion if they are coming from the same source. Tomography is imaging by sections or slices. So OCT basically means imaging in sections using coherent monochromatic light. And the light used here in OCT that is used to study retina is infrared wavelength of 830 nanometers, and a 78 diameter lens concentrates this light on the retina. And the OCT is basically based on Michelson's interferometer. So this is just briefly, I'm going into the physics and not very deeply, because some examiner may ask you what is OCT based on, the physical principles, how do you get the images? So this is based on Michelson's interferometer principles. So there is a light source here. This light source will send a pulse of light to a beam splitter here. So this is a beam splitter. This is a partially perforated mirror. The partially perforated mirror, what it does is it sends one light. Partially it will reflect the light to one mirror, and partially it will allow the light to go straight to the second mirror. And in OCT, in this second mirror, instead of the mirror, we have the eye here, and eye is used as a medium of reflection. So this mirror will reflect the light back, and then again through the beam splitter, the light will go to the detector. And again, this mirror also, or the eye or any other tissue that is going to be studied, reflects the light back. Again, it will strike this beam splitter here and go to the detector. So detector, what it will do is it will analyze the signal that is coming from this mirror, that is the reference mirror, and this part, that is the tissue that is to be studied. And it will study the delay of time in which the time delay which is happening between this reflected light and this reflected light. So if you have a light that comes in phase, all the light waves are in phase, means all the waves, their peaks and troughs are combining with each other. They will give you an accentuated signal. But if it is out of phase, it will give you a dark signal. Hence you get these dark and light bands in OCT. Types of OCT now comes again. Your examination asks you something about what types of OCTs are there. So the types of OCT, the first was the time domain OCT and the spectral domain OCT. And what was the difference between the time domain and spectral domain OCT? The time domain OCT had a single detector. As we have discussed in this previous slide, this detector which used to detect the reflected light was single detector was there. But in spectral domain, it's a whole spectrograph which can analyze whole of the beam of light coming together, and it can collect multiple signals at a single time. So because it was a single detector, it was slow, and this is a rapid technique, and it used to have 1 pixel at a time. It used to analyze and used to frame an image. But with spectral domain, this is improved to 2048 pixels at one single time. And the time in the speed also, in time domain 512 A scans were done in 1.28 seconds, while in spectral domain 512 A scans can be done in 0.02 seconds. So you can see with the spectral domain OCT, the speed of scanning improved, the resolution also improved because it introduced 2048 pixels at a time. And more number of scans can be taken in a particular time. Then came the swept source OCT. And now the difference between spectral domain and swept source is, see, both swept source and spectral domain are basically the basic principle was the same. But the light source again changed from 830 nanometers to light source of 1050 nanometers, which improved the bandwidth of the light. And so you can get a bigger slice of the retina. You can include some choroidal areas, some vitreous areas in the same scan, which was not possible with the spectral domain. And detector in this case, as I discussed, was spectrometer, and detector now in swept source OCT became a CMOS camera, which is again a very highly sensitive instrument which can detect and which can even of a higher resolution images it can make. And the speed of spectral domain OCTs was 52,000 A scans per second, which improved to more than a lakh, and it can go up to 4 lakh A scans per second, the swept source OCT. So this was basically the principle of OCT. I think any questions till now, if there, then we move on to our next part.
Sangeet, just for a historical perspective, if I'm not mistaken, at SMU Media Fellowship, there was no OCT machine, because even in my fellowship, there was no OCT machine, and you did before me a fellowship. Yes. I became a consultant, and I think in 2002, we got our first OCT machine. When did you use your first OCT machine?
I think it was around 2004 we started doing OCT.
I think I finished my fellowship, and when I was in the last few months of fellowship, still the OCT had not come.
Yeah.
When was that?
2003.
I remember one thing.
6 months they had acquired a OCT machine. So
I remember one thing, like the PDT, photodynamic therapy, for treatment of AMD, wet AMD was introduced, and OCT just before that was introduced. And we had the PDT machine in our hospital first, and the OCT came on later on only. So it was quite, I think at that time, 2004, around 2004, we started doing OCT in our hospital. But I think 2000 was the year it was now it was selling commercially. The OCT, although it was invented in 1990 by David Hwang. Pardon?
Dr.
Sangeet,
Yes.
Fatima wants to know about this CMOS camera in detail. A little bit about the
CMOS is a type of like if you fully if this is an abbreviation CMOS, it's a continuous multi-oxide semiconductor. So so what happens is this is a very light. It's again a light sensitive. You can see it's a CMOS. If you use your routine, if you use your SLRs or DSLRs also, some of them they have CMOS receptors in it, and the image quality definitely improves with this. I don't know exactly the physics of CMOS, how it works, but it is a very high quality receptor which is present in the swept source OCT machines.
I think Fatima, no one is going to ask you so much of detail, because even
No. I think
I
will answer the question the other way around. I don't think any ophthalmologist can answer that question.
Yes. So don't.
But I do know that Michelson interferometer, those things you need to mug up and answer all those questions if you're a postgraduate. You have to mug up that whether you like it or not. Mirror 1, mirror 2 image, you mug it up and pass it off. 1050, 830, these numbers you have to know. I think we move on to the main.
So now, shall I continue now?
Yes, please continue.
Yes, please.
So before we go to the interpretation of OCT, I think first we have to know about the anatomy of the retina. The retina basically consists of 10 layers. I think most of us will be knowing this present over here in this diagram, in this histology section is internal limiting membrane, and this red line is the external limiting membrane. And most of the neurosensory retina lies in between, between this, and then there is retinal pigment epithelium below that. And on this right hand side, it is the this is the diagrammatic representation of retinal pigment epithelium, and then this is all is the photoreceptors. Then this is the first synapse or the outer plexiform layer, this the axons, and then there is the intermediate axon, and then this is the second, that is the inner plexiform layer, and then above is the ganglion cells and the retinal nerve fiber layer. So this is how basically the retina is formed, and you are able to see all these images of all these layers in your OCT scan as is shown in this picture. So you see all these images like from the outer side, it starts from basically the retinal nerve fiber layer. Internal limiting membrane, you can make out a very thin streak above the retinal nerve fiber layer, but mainly the red zone that you see on the normal OCT machine or normal OCT printouts, the outermost layer you will see the retinal nerve fiber layer, and the innermost layer that you see the red zone will be the retinal pigment epithelium, and the retina and all the layers lie in between. So then retinal nerve fiber layer is a bright band, then there will be a dark band, a ganglion cell layer, then there will be a bright band of inner plexiform layer, then a light band of inner nuclear layer, then again outer plexiform layer will be a bright band, you'll see it as dark green, and then again there will be a lighter band of Henle's fiber layer. So one thing you have to remember is like all the layers, all the layers which have fibers like or the axons or the synapses, they appear as brighter, and all the layers which contain cell bodies, they will appear as lighter or the black in the OCT scan. And then once you reach this membrane, this is the outer limiting membrane. You can see, you can see the cursor here.
Yes.
Yes.
Pointing to the external limiting membrane, and below this will be then there are three dark red lines you will be seeing. And this is, again, I'll go in more in detail. Sorry, more in detail here. So these three lines, you have to know what they stand for. So the outermost is the retinal pigment epithelium, and above the second dark band from outermost side, this is the interdigitation zone. And what is the interdigitation zone? It is the see the RPE cells, they have some apices pointing upwards, and all the photoreceptors, they fit in those apices. And so the junction of the photoreceptors and apices and the RP cells, this is the interdigitation zone. And this is the second dark layer, red layer that you are seeing on these days on spectral OCTs. And this is the third one, is the ellipsoid zone, this third layer. So, and in between the dark band here, you are seeing this is the outer zone of photoreceptors, outer segment, sorry, of photoreceptors. And the other one is the myoid zone. So if you see here, this is a diagrammatic representation of a photoreceptor. So the photoreceptor will have outer segment, then the inner segment, outer segment junction, and then there will be a inner segment, which is again made up of two parts. One is the myoid and the other is the ellipsoid. The ellipsoid contains the ellipsoid bodies. And so this one is the inner segment. Both the darker one is the ellipsoid layer, and the brighter one is the ellipsoid layer, and the darker one is the myoid layer. And above that, you see the external limiting membrane. And then comes the outer nuclear layer here, which is the inner segment, inner photoreceptors. Main cell body of the photoreceptors is lying here. And once this, then the axons of the photoreceptors, and there will be synapse here. The axons will synapse with the inner intermediate axons here, and this will be the form of the outer nuclear layer. Outer plexiform layer, which will be again this dark green, appear as dark green in the normal OCT scans. So you have to learn all these layers, and you have to understand, if you have to interpret the OCT, you have to know all these layers, and all these layers are important because these layers do carry meaning during the interpretation of the OCT. So like the day before yesterday, during a presentation on retinitis pigmentosa, we were discussing how this retinitis pigmentosa gets affected. So what happens is, part of the you see the retinitis pigmentosa, the first cell is the outer segment of the rods, and then the inner segment of the rods, and then the cell body of the rods. So one by one, these layers will get affected, and once this inner cell bodies of the photoreceptors get affected, the whole outer layer will collapse, and the and this inner retina will fall directly onto the retinal pigment epithelium, and then the retinal pigment epithelium migrates around the blood vessels of the inner retina, and then those bony spicules are formed. So somebody was asking how these bony spicules are formed. So now coming next to this is a normal retina, and this is the foveal depression. You can see from here. And as I told you, the innermost red layer is the retinal nerve fiber layer, and the outermost red layer is the retinal pigment epithelium. And within these two layers lie all the other layers of the retina. Again, you can see there are alternating yellow and green bands. As I explained to you, all layers of retina can be seen very well in modern days OCTs. So now, if you are given a picture, how will you know whether what is the orientation of the scan, what is anterior, what is posterior, what is nasal, what is temporal? So how to see that? So one thing is foveal depression. The side which the foveal depression is the anterior side, and you will see one more thing is that retinal nerve fiber layer is not continuous. Sometimes at the area of fovea, it will give way. But the RPE is a continuous red layer on the outside, here. So, and you will see the choroid below the RPE. So this is the posterior aspect. The foveal depression is present on the interior aspect. And now how you make out whether it's a nasal or temporal. So you first see which eye you are going to see. This is the left eye. And then you see these arrows here over the scan. These two arrows, they are pointing in this direction. So the scan is moving from this direction to this direction. And if it is a left eye, it is moving from, therefore it is moving from nasal to temporal part. So this side will be nasal and on this right side will be the temporal of the fovea. And if you see this scan, the scan on the top, the arrow is pointing upwards like this. So again, it means that the scan is moving from inferior to superior. So the inferior part is on the left hand side and the superior part is on the right hand side. So here, that is how you will come to know how you can orient the scan, which part is nasal, which is temporal, and which is superior and which is...
Dr. Sangeet, there's a question
Yes.
from, just 1 second. This is Dr. Kavya. Sir, if arrows and eye is not mentioned, how to identify which eye OCT is taken?
I think then it will be very difficult to identify. I don't know, but I think it is a standard on all the scans. It comes like this only. It's not mentioned. You may still make out it is superior or inferior, but then you can't make out whether it is nasal or temporal. If I cut these arrows from, if I suppose I draw a line here and cut these arrows, and if I show you only this picture, then it won't be, we won't be able to make out whether this is in this lower scan, this is nasal or temporal, or this is superior or inferior. All the scans will be the same. I think these arrows and the eye that is mentioned is for this purpose only.
I'll interrupt here.
Yes.
I'll interrupt here. I mentioned this when we had the angiography class also. It can be very difficult sometimes. You will have one part of the retina shown. It's sometimes you don't know which eye it is. You don't know what it is. There is no bravado in trying to guess these things. You can only say, I can't make out which eye. This is what is happening here. Like I said in angiography also, fluorescein, if you have to say, the duration should be written. The leakage of CNVM, staining of the CNVM, unless which phase it is taken in, which eye it is, sometimes very difficult to make out. Some disc is partly seen, infranasal sometimes look a little vague. So I think the bravado is not in guessing the eye without looking at things. Better to have everything written. If you cannot just say, I cannot make out which eye it is. And like Dr. said, sometimes it can be extremely difficult for those scans, things not mentioned, difficult to make out. I think just one after that, sir.
Shall I proceed?
Yeah, we'll proceed, sir.
Yes.
So again, the main two types of orientation scans that we generally do is, one is the radial scans and the other is the raster scans, and all the other scans, they are dependent on these. There are many other scans also, but main patterns are this only, the radial scans or the raster scans. You can get a single line scan, you can get a cross-sectional scans, but all are based on basically these two scan patterns. So what is a radial scan? Radial scans, the scan that moves in a radial pattern. Like if you see this image over here, it will give you multiple scans in the radial manner. Radial means the center is the fovea or whatever area you localize. But mainly if we have fovea as the center, then this center will be fovea and the scan will move in a circular pattern with this fovea at the center. And so you'll get multiple scans in a radial, that will give you a radial orientation. And similarly in a raster scan, the scan will move in a square or a rectangular fashion. First you get the topmost scan, then below it, the scan will move in this fashion. And you will get a raster scan. So initially, when the patient first visits, ideally get both the raster and the radial scans to get the maximum information. And then you can always, if for a revisit, you can always plan what type of scan you want, and you can get the scan later on. But so next comes the quantitative analysis. So because these two layers, RNFL layer and the RPE, are very well made out on the OCT, the difference between them can be calculated by the computer very easily. And so quantitative analysis becomes very easy by the computer. Even because these two layers are also quite easily demarcated, this the ellipsoid zone and the RPE will give a very accurate quantitative data on the thickness of this layer, the thickness of the whole of the retina. And nowadays the scans have also come which can automatically detect the thickness of the choroid also. I'm not going into that detail yet. And so this is a typical quantitative analysis map of a patient. And you see, this is a fundus image, and the scan is juxtaposed over it and showing which area of the retina the scan has been taken. And this is a B scan. These two vertical scan, B scan, and a horizontal B scan will show briefly about the qualitative analysis of the OCT image. And then this is a thickness map. This is a thickness map, this circular, and the center is the foveal avascular zone. And then this is the 500 microns outside the fovea. And then this is again 1000 microns outside the fovea, this outer circle. So this becomes again important seeing in the diabetic macular edema, especially when you have to do laser according to the DRS or the ETDRS trial, ETDRS studies. They have shown that if the thickness of the retina is increased within this inner circle, then you have to do laser. Otherwise, you can observe also. So this gives you an idea of what the thickness of the retina is in a particular area of the retina. And this thickness you have to correlate with this circle here in the fundus image. And this will give you an idea, okay, this part of the retina is thick and this part of the retina is thick, and I have to treat that. And this again is a detailed analysis of what is the thickness in superior hemisphere. This will give you average values, what is the average foveal thickness, and this will give you the macular volumes again in a similar fashion. So this is about the quantitative analysis. I'm not going much into it because I think more important is qualitative analysis. So again, pardon?
And I just wanted to make a point that the thickness map also you can you can share very well with your patient regarding how the treatment is going. Because apart from showing him the OCT scan, you can say that, okay, now you see after anti-VEGF injection or after laser, the thickness of the central part is decreasing. So that is why the color is changing from red to green to yellow. So this is how in clinical practice the patient understand the way their eye is now getting better.
And there are softwares also in many OCT machines. They will give you a sequence thickness maps, like in visual fields we get. So you can always show, like you see the thickness is continuously reducing every month after we have started treatment. So all these softwares are there in the machine, but I just thought like I'll mainly go in for the basic interpretation of OCT as was the topic. So mainly I've focused more on qualitative analysis of the OCT. But quantitative analysis is also very important in many parts of the retinal disease evaluation and follow-up. Yes. So next is the qualitative analysis, again showing this picture. This OCT B scan is showing all the layers of the retina. Again, you can make out this small thin green layer. Over this red area is the internal limiting membrane. Then the dark red is the retinal nerve fiber layer, and then coming in is the ganglion cell layer, inner plexiform layer, then the inner nuclear layer, the outer plexiform layer, the outer nuclear layer. Then this yellow line here, this which separates, is the external limiting membrane. And below the external limiting membrane is the myoid zone of the photoreceptors, then the ellipsoid zone of the photoreceptors, and then this interdigitation zone and the retinal pigment epithelium. And below the retinal pigment epithelium, these are the choriocapillaries. So for you can divide your OCT picture into various regions. So one is the pre-retina, the region that is above the retina, and whether some thing is present in this region you can see. Then second is the epiretina, just above the retina, the superficial layer of the supermost, just above the inner layer of the retina. Then intraretina, that is this part, the whole part of the retina. And next is the subretina, whether any lesion is present subretinally. So if the thing is, once you have seen that there is some abnormality, then you have to say which part this abnormality is. So whether it is a pre-retinal, whether it is an epiretinal, intraretinal, or subretinal. So you have to mention this. And for evaluation of the retina, basically what I follow is the profiling of the retina. So we have divided OCT retinal morphology into 4 profiles. And these are the pre-retinal profile, the overall retinal profile, the foveal profile, or the macular profile. So this is a normal pre-retinal profile, this dark black window above the retina. This is a normal pre-retinal profile. Sometimes you may see some blue dots present in this profile. And those blue dots are nothing else but they are noise. And this noise is sometimes useful, as you have to create this noise to better visualize low reflective structures. So, but they are basically normal and they don't signify anything. So this is a normal pre-retinal profile, and see many abnormalities. Retinal membranes, the vitreoretinal strands, the vitreoretinal traction also we were discussing a few days ago, how it will look like. And the layer above is the posterior, is when the PVD is there, it starts to, but it is tightly adherent here. Although the vitreous detaches from other areas, it is stuck over here. And once it creates a pull, so it causes a traction on the retina. And this is the vitreoretinal traction. Or you may see, so this scan particular that I'm showing in this slide is the
Sangeet, your voice is cracking a lot.
Vitreoretinal traction. Dark red shadow in a pre.
There is some voice cracking. I mean, it's not clear, sir.
Hello. Now it is okay. Hello. I'm coming closer. I think there is a must be the problem.
Now it's better. Now it's okay.
Now it's better. I'm coming closer to the microphone now. So you see, this is a dark band, red colored band here. This is nothing else but silicone oil. But you have to be very careful in seeing retinal area. You can see all these types of disturbances here. Or you can see an epiretinal membrane just above the retina or the epiretinal areas. You can see this was a fundus photograph, and in this lower scan, you see the epiretinal membrane which is present, and above that epiretinal membrane you can see a separate layer of posterior hyaloid which is present, in the pre-retinal space. And in the epiretinal space, you can see this dark red
Voice is not clear.
appearing dark red, and so this once now and once we have, I think it is just because of the dust storm maybe.
Okay.
I'm not changed anything. Now it is coming.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Now we
Breaking.
can, yes.
No. So once we had done the surgery, the epiretinal membrane, you can see in the scan, has gone, and the contour of the fovea, this was a pseudo-hole which was created by the epiretinal membrane, getting normalized. So
Sangeet,
so this is an epiretinal. This is a,
Dr.
pardon?
Sangeet.
Yes.
Yeah, just 1 minute. I'll just stop you here. How many these example slides do you have approximately? Approximately.
Yes.
How many slides of these examples do you have?
For each disease.
How many approximately?
For all retinal diseases, he's asking,
The
sir.
total presentation.
Yes.
For I think totally something like 50 plus slides must be there in the presentation.
No. Diseases, how many more are there?
We'll just go for the profiles. I think.
Okay. Fine. Let's go ahead. I won't stop. I'll discuss at the end then. Please go ahead.
Not many. So we'll just quite separate from the retinal nerve fiber layer. This is a very thick epiretinal membrane which is asphyxiating the fovea here. And once again you do surgery and you see this epiretinal membrane has been taken off and the retina is now fine. So here again pre-retinal profile, you can see some kind of new vascularization over the disc. So this is not a normal structure over the disc. Again, you can see this highly reflected structure. So this is not a normal structure. This is a NVD which is present over the disc. So after the pre-retinal profile, I'll go to the normal overall retinal profile. So the normal overall retinal profile has a slightly concave curvature that you would expect from observing the surface of a globe. But profiles would include an exaggerated concavity or convexity, and retinal folds would result in an abnormal overall profile. So here, so this is a taken care of the pre-retinal profile. You look at the overall profile of the scan, and this is a convexity. It should not be there. Or you can see here this case we discussed earlier also. There is sudden increase in convexity, and this is also not normal. In this case, it was due to choroidal hemangioma. So these things you have to study, and once you treat the choroidal hemangioma, the things became okay. And the OCT came back to the earlier below the choroid. The choroid is also lifted, the RP is also lifted. So it is either inside the choroid or behind the choroid. And so this is an abnormal concavity. If you notice that there is retinoschisis and there is a neurosensory detachment, but you also see that it is more concave. The overall scan is more concave, and this is because the patient was highly myope, and this scan shows the eye which is more myopic side, and it is more concave. So this is the second thing that you have to look after looking into the pre-retinal profile. You look at the overall retinal profile. What is the overall retinal profile of the scan? Then we come to the foveal profile. As Dr. Saurabh Sinha has also in the beginning said that this is the most important part of the OCT scan. You have to look at the fovea, and you have to look at the various this foveal depression. This is the normal foveal depression. This is a slight depression. It is neither too deep and not too shallow. So this is a normal foveal profile. And you can see various abnormalities in this normal foveal profile. You can see a macular pseudohole or a macular lamellar hole or macular cysts or macular full thickness macular holes in this profile. So this is a picture. I think I've taken this from I don't remember which doctor, but he gave me this picture, and this shows the various profiles of this foveal profiles of OCT. And starting from here, you can see this is a macular pseudohole. And in this case, going down, this macular pseudohole has now deepened. And again, it has become more deep. And along with this depth, you can also see that there is a epiretinal membrane which is forming over the retinal surface. So this is how a macular pseudohole looks like. And what is the difference between a pseudohole and a lamellar macular hole? So when this deepening is also accompanied by lateral extensions, as you see in this scan, you see there is a lateral extension. So this is now becoming a lamellar macular hole. And again in this, you can see in the pre-retinal profile also, you can see the posterior hyaloid which is there. And this is a foveal pseudocyst. So what happens is this vitreoretinal traction pulls the retina up, and this forms a small cystic-like structure below. This is a pseudocyst. It's not a true cyst, but it's an anatomical deficit that has happened because of this traction. And you see, as the traction increases, this cyst may increase in size. And ultimately, if it keeps on increasing, it may cause a macular hole to form. And this is a scans of the macular hole, various stages. You can see stage 1, which is an occult macular hole, still covered with the inner layers. And here the vitreous is now pulling up this layer and causing a stage 2 macular hole. Again, this operculum has now formed in the stage 3 macular hole, and this is a stage 4 macular hole with complete total posterior vitreous detachment happening place. And the E is the after surgery. This patient comes back to normal. So this is one patient which refused surgery from the very start, progressed to a full thickness macular hole, and then after surgery regained some vision. And these are again some more patients. This is stage 1 macular hole. You can see that is an occult macular hole. There is no hole opening as such, but again there is a traction and the hole is getting formed. It is still covered. This is stage 2 macular hole. This vitreous traction is lifting now the retina up, and the hole is opening up. This is the stage 3 macular hole with the operculum, and PVD is not complete. It is still present in this periphery. And you see the hole is small in size here in the fundus image. And you can see these radial lines. They also indicate that it is a stage 3 macular hole. And now it is a stage 4 macular hole. The operculum has gone, and it is a full thickness macular hole now formed. So these are various stages of macular holes, and this completes the foveal profile.
There's one question on
Yeah.
macular hole.
Yes.
How to differentiate stage 1 macular hole from a pseudo hole?
Pseudo hole, as I told you, if I go back here, so you see this is a stage 1 macular hole. The hole is formed. There is a hole full thickness almost, but it is still covered by a membrane on the top. Whereas the pseudo hole will be like this. It will be you can say deepening of the fovea. The fovea first will become more triangular, then more squarish.
One slide which you showed all the stages.
More conical. So this is how a pseudo hole will be there. And pseudo hole will not be a full thickness defect. It will be a partial thickness defect. I think the person has got it.
Yes. And then the lamellar extension that you said, that is also a very important one.
Yeah, the lamellar extension will give rise to a lamellar macular hole.
Yes.
So now coming to the macular profile. So macular profile and often does include the fovea as its center. But you have a look at the fovea first, and then you start start looking at the other parts of the area of the macula. Once you have taken care of the pre-retinal profile, sorry, the overall profile and the foveal profile, now you study the rest of the macula. How so the way third macula tissue or the CNVMs or the RPTs. So I'll just show you.
We missed a part of what you were saying because the connection are very good. So
yes.
we can now see this. Can you start from here again? This macular profile, interretinal abnormalities, subretinal abnormalities. Can you start from here again? We could not hear you very well.
Okay, so now after you have finished with the the overall retinal is on each side of the fovea. So, so any abnormalities in this area you have to identify, and these various anomalies that can be present will be diffuse retinal edema, a cystoid macular edema. Anomalies may be scar tissue, CNVM or RPTS. Although there are many more entities which can be made out, but I'm sticking just to the basics, and so I've listed only these many. I think if you are able to guess what is this, I think it's quite a lot. And so first coming to, this is a neurosensory detachment in central serous choroidal retinopathy. So you can see there is a presence of fluid. So this is an old scan. You can see there's a presence of fluid between the retinal pigment epithelium and the neurosensory retina. So this is a neurosensory retina, central serous retinopathy, and it may also be associated with these small pigment epithelial detachments which are present in these types of scans. So this is a scan of a central serous choroidal retinopathy. So now this is a scan of cystoid macular edema. You see the fundus image, you see this petaloid appearance of the fovea here, and you see the OCT scan.
There is some time lag between when you are shifting to the next slide. So if you can.
I'll go a little bit slow.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this is.
Dr. Sangeet.
Shall I move to the?
शुरू में बोल दी कि सबका बढ़िया है.
Okay, I will speak now. Am I audible, Pooja?
Yes, very well.
Okay.
Am I audible now?
So in this slide, Sangeet, go ahead. So in this slide, what Dr. Sangeet had showed us the beginning itself, the pre-retinal and epiretinal, pre-retinal is fine, epiretinal in the sides. Sangeet, you're going and coming in the middle. No. Dr. Sangeet, we can't hear you at all. So I will try and take over a little bit over here. In this cystoid macular edema slide, Pooja, what slide do you see? Cystoid macular edema, right?
Yes, I see cystoid macular edema.
Yeah. We lost him totally. Yeah. So what I will try and those two slides, all of you remember the two slides he showed us right now. The cystoid macular edema, like he's trying to tell us that in his way, like what I said, I feel a problem. He said epiretinal, pre-retinal, retinal, subretinal. So again, you cannot look at an OC and say cystoid macular edema. What I would like you to do is, you should say that pre-retinal, it's fine. Yeah, Sangeet, please come back. I think
Is
nearly
it
back.
there? Okay, I'm going to make you a host, then you can share your screen and then I'll reclaim my host. Give me 1 second.
Okay. In the meantime, I'll keep speaking. You all can try and hook him up again. So that's cystostom macroedema slide. Pre-retinally, there was nothing. On the retina, epiretinally, there was nothing. Intraretinal, there were these dark areas, and at the intraretinal area, at the subretinal area also there was nothing. So based on that, you know this patient has retinal at the foveal area. Now on that basis, you can say this fluid over there. Now this disease could be due to diabetic maculopathy. This disease could be due to branch retinal vein occlusion. This could be any disease, but at least the finding that there's fluid there. So again and again, what I keep repeating.
Dr. Sangeet, you can share your screen now. I've made you host.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'll try and answer Kapil Sharma's question. Dr. Sharma asked a question, sir, which image is better, pseudocolor or a black and white image? I have an answer to this. For us as retina specialists, the black and white images are much more sharper, much more better, much more easy to interpret and understand ourselves better. But the pseudo color one, for the patients, they feel very excited looking at it. But as an ophthalmologist clinician, I would say the black and white image is better. Is Dr. Sangeet back?
He's back, but he's having an issue with sharing his screen.
So Dr. Kapil, another question. So what is the difference between pre-retinal and epiretinal? See, again, Kapil, these are very, Dr. Sharma, these are very, these words are very loosely used by us. ILM, sub-ILM. So what in Dr. Sangeet's presentation, what he is referring to was by pre-retinal was in the vitreous interface. On the epiretinal, what he meant was on top of the retinal surface actually. That's what he meant by that. What I would refer to is what is there in the vitreous cavity above the retina is pre-retinal, what's on the retina is epiretinal. A typical example being, let's say a patient has already had a PVD, but you can see the white string on top of the fovea, some shadowing, some kind of a reflection over there. That would be pre-retinal. But if there is no PVD and the thick epiretinal membrane, like the video, like the color photo he showed of pre and post important, that is what he's referring to as epiretinal. There's another question from Dr. Pramod Kumar. This is a very important question. What is the importance of IS-OS junction? So I will ask the question back to Dr. Pramod Kumar. What is the IS and what is OS? What is the inner segment? What is the outer segment? What are these two? Kapil says thank you. Yeah. So Dr. Pramod Kumar, what is inner segment? What is the outer segment junction? What does it refer to? When you answer that, I will my answer will be even easier. Okay, I will answer that myself. The IS-OS junction, yeah, correct. The photoreceptor part, we know if the photoreceptor integrity is lost in any disease process, we know that that is a very important part of the retina. The retina itself is a very important part, but that part of it is very important. Once that is lost, that junction is distorted, is not continuous. There is a separation over there. There is a discontinuity that we want to use. Know that whatever treatment we do for this patient, anti-VEGF treatment, steroid treatment, whatever we do, the prognosis is not very good. So the importance of the integrity of the IS-OS junction is in predicting the outcome of these patients after treatment. Even if the edema goes down, he says quantitative analysis. Sangeet, are you back? You can see his photo very well. Okay. Pooja, you are muted. Dr. Pooja, you are muted.
There was a very nice slide which Dr. Sangeet had showed in the beginning, which showed the parts of the photoreceptors, and it mentioned the IS-OS junction. So if you have listened to that, I think you will get the answer.
Yeah.
Very beautifully, he had made a diagrammatic representation of.
Mind you, this sweat so like why I brought in the question of when did we start OCT? 2004. There was a time domain. Then we had we kept changing our terminologies over the years. The ellipsoid zone, myoid zone came in. Then there's a Z line, zoster line in between, which a few years back came along. So we have changed our terminology as we have grown along. And a lot of these terms, unfortunately, are very used very loosely by a lot of us. Unfortunately, the classifications do exist for vitreoretinal retraction. We have this class. Adhesion is only when the retina is stuck to each other. Traction is when the retina is pulled. Focal traction, diffuse traction. We use different kind of terminologies. And back with Sangeet.
You can go ahead and share your screen now.
Shall I go on? Wait for Sangeet.
So in the meantime, you can go on.
I'm sharing. Am I audible?
We can hear you well. I think, yeah, you're back. You're back. Yes, yes.
Okay. The screen now. The slides are coming.
Yes, slides are coming.
Cystoid macular edema.
Cystoid macular edema.
Okay. Yeah, cystoid macular edema. So cystoid macular edema, if you see on a fundus image, you will see this petalloid.
No, Sangeet, sorry. Before you go ahead, there are 3 questions we'll take quickly. One is from Dr. Kapil Sharma for you. Is OS junction and ellipsoid zone both are different or same? Sangeet?
It's not exactly the same. The ellipsoid. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
It is not exactly the same. The ellipsoid zone is basically the inner part of the inner segment of the photoreceptors, which contain the ellipsoid bodies. So inner part of the photoreceptors has two parts. One is the myoid part and the ellipsoid part. The ellipsoid part is the one which contains the ellipsoid bodies, and below this part lies the junction between the outer and the inner segment of the photoreceptors. Am I clear on that?
What is Fourier domain?
Pardon?
What is Fourier domain?
Fourier domain and spectral domain are the same OCTs.
Yeah. And there's one more question which says, if there is a stage 1 ERM, I myself confused on that. What do you mean by stage 1 ERM? How to diagnose an OCT? So if you ask me what is stage 1 ERM, I myself am not going to answer that. In which map can we assess ERM better?
I think the qualitative map will be you can do both a raster scan and a radial scan to detect any even very small lesions, and how you will diagnose a very thin ERM or the stage 1 ERM that we generally call as cellophane reflex. You will see small folds of the inner retina. You may not be able to see the epiretinal membrane as such, but you will, on the top of the retina, it will not be a smooth appearance. It will be a slightly granular. You may see small folds of the retinal nerve fiber layer, and that will give you an idea that there is something wrong and there is a cellophane reflex or the stage 1 ERM as is called. Although the stage 1 ERM is not a particular name for that ERM.
Yeah. So I will stop over here. We'll ask, there is a question from Dr. Kapil. We'll leave that for now. What is drill? Let us have your presentation. We'll come back to this question later on. Since your connection is good, let's continue, please.
So this is a cystoid macular edema. You see cystoid macular edema when you see a fundus, you will see this petalloid pattern in the macular area. If you are able to make out this small, there is a small center like of the flower, and then there are small petals which are arising out of the center. So this is a cystoid macular edema. And on OCT, you will see these cysts. These cysts, this black area, it shows fluid, and these septae in between. These are the cysts. So this is mainly present in the Henle's layer. And this gives you, this is the typical appearance of a cystoid macular edema. So cysts you can see in the inner retina and the outer retina also. And this cystoid macular edema can be associated with a neurosensory detachment, or it cannot be associated with neurosensory detachment, and it has got a prognostic value. I think we'll come to that later. when we discuss the diabetic macular edema as such. So going to the next, these are the various patterns of age-related macular degeneration you may be seeing. And on the top left is you can see this convoluted.
Oh, just hold on. Your slide has not changed. Hold on.
It's changed on my computer.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, that's right. Fine. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Fine.
On the top left, these are various patterns of the age-related macular degeneration which you may be seeing. And on the top left, you see this is a convoluted, like this up and down, like a bumpy surface of the retina pigment epithelium. So this is due to drusense. You can see there is no intraretinal or subretinal fluid. These are just drusense, this convoluted type of retinal pigment epithelium. So if you see a scan like this, you just say that these are drusense and nothing else. This is there is no wet AMD. It's the early stage of dry AMD. And so this is a pigment epithelial detachment. I also showed you one slide earlier also. You see there is a break in this retinal pigment epithelium. And you see here, it goes up here. And this is the retinal pigment epithelial detachment. The neurosensory detachment will be above this retinal pigment epithelium. The pigment epithelial detachment, you will see this break in the retinal pigment epithelium layer. Then this is on the top, down left, you see this is a RPE tear. Again, there is a pigment epithelial detachment here. This outer red layer goes up and then it breaks here. So there is a RPE tear and there is also some intraretinal fluid in this area. And this is a full-fledged choroidal neovascular membrane. You can see this highly reflective substance, highly reflective area lesion, which is now eroded the retinal pigment epithelium, has gone, eroded all the ellipsoid zone and the interdigitation zone, and has gone into the intraretinal space. And so this is a typical choroidal neovascular membrane, which has now formed. And you can see some cystoid spaces above this membrane also. So these are various patterns you may be seeing, although there are many more patterns which may be present in ARMD, but these are the basic patterns what you may be seeing in the age-related macular degeneration. So this is another, the idiopathic polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy. Although it is very difficult to make it out on OCT, but there are some features of OCT which points towards idiopathic IPCV. Although the ICG is the classical investigation which will diagnose the IPCV, but there are some features which may indicate that the IPCV may be there. First is this sharply elevated, this pointed you can see, sharply elevated pigment epithelial detachment. And then there is this PED is also associated with a notch. So this is not, this indicates that it is not only a PED, but there might be some other lesion. Maybe it's a CNVM or maybe it's a polyp present below this PED. And then you see that there is this double layer sign. Double layer sign of the outer of the RPE Brooks membrane is separate here, just adjacent to this PED. So if this double layer sign is present adjacent to the PED, then this is another sign which indicates that it is a IPCV. Just ask a question of some OCT features of IPCV. So these are basically three features of IPCV on OCT, that although IPCV can be diagnosed only by ICG angiography. So once you have cleared all the profiles, once you have seen all the profiles, now we come to some kind of lesions. So there can be hyperreflective lesions in the retina, or there can be hyporeflective lesions in the retina. And some hyperreflective lesions, they include hemorrhages, hard and soft exudates, pigments, fibrin, or drusense. These are hyperreflective lesions, which you may see in the retina. This pigment like present maybe melanin due to nevi, or fibrin may be there. In CSR, as Dr. Pooja was discussing on that day, the fibrin in CSR appears as a hyperreflective lesion between the area of the neurosensory detachment. Then drusens also appear as hyperreflective bright yellow lesions on the OCT, and hard and soft exudates, they appear as red dots on the in the intraretinal spaces. And hemorrhages again give you a hyperreflectance, and they also cause blockage of the signal below the hemorrhage if the hemorrhage is dense. And then the okay, now you see this is a small hard exudate present here.
Sangeet, hold on, the slide has not changed. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So this is
Fine.
So if you see this red dot, you see everything is normal. The pre-retinal profile is normal. The overall profile is normal. The macular profile is normal. The foveal profile is normal. But you see this small red dot here. So this is due to a hard exudate which was present in this area. So you have to, once if you see all the profiles are normal, then you go to see whether any hyperreflective or hyporeflective lesions are present or not. So this
Sangeet, you can show the shadowing of that also.
Yeah.
Of the hard exudate.
Okay. So you see once this hyperreflective lesion is present. So if you see below that, you see there is total absence of the signal here. So this is a shadowing, what Dr. Saurabh Sinha said, the shadowing effect of these hyperreflective lesions. I'll come to the shadowing later. I have some slides for that. So now you come, so this is a hyporeflective lesion. So this is an outer lamellar macular hole. This is due to a solar burn which was there. The burn usually affects the outer layers, and you get this outer lamellar macular hole. You see there is no signal here. All these layers are absent here. So this is a type of outer lamellar, hyporeflective lesion.
Lot of clinical patients you will come across with the outer lamellar macular holes or solar retinopathy, as we say. So this diagnosis becomes very important.
Classical feature of solar retinopathy. And this is an outer lamellar, large outer lamellar macular hole. This was due to a laser burn. Has happened. This was an Air Force pilot who was cleaning his aircraft with some laser beam and accidentally hit the laser beam in his eye. It was a very strong laser and caused this laser burn over here. And this is again outer lamellar macular. Effect is there. There is a deficiency of the tissue in that area. So the other type of hyporeflectivity which we can get is a blocked reflectance. As Dr. Saurabh Sinha was saying, so you see here this is a hyporeflective lesion. Here, this small dark black area. In this is due to this.
So 1 minute, hold on. No, the slide has not changed. Yeah.
Okay. So as Dr. Saurabh Sinha was saying, so this is the type of blocked reflectance. So you see this is a dark black area between the various layers.
Sangeet, Dr. Sangeet, I will interpret this one. There was a question in between when you are not there. So in the pre-retinal space, if you can show with your pointer, with the pre-retinal space. Yeah. So there are these blue daughter. You taught us that this is noise. Am I correct?
Yes.
This is noise.
This is
now.
Yes.
Okay. Now at the in the epiretinal area, can you show us the epiretinal area?
Yeah.
Epiretinal on the other side, on the other extreme. Yeah. Now this epiretinal area. Now I have not seen the patient clinically. I could pass this off as saying this is an epiretinal membrane over there. It may or may not be there, but you cannot challenge me for saying being wrong. Am I correct? Am I wrong?
It may be there. I'm also not sure in this patient it was there or not. It could be just a hyaloid which is separating at this point. Well, I don't remember this patient exactly.
No. So just for discussion's sake. So this could be taken as epiretinal membrane, epiretinal area. So pre-retinal, epiretinal. Then you told us interretinal foveal contour looks okay. Interretinal looks okay. Macular area looks okay. Then the other corner which you showed us, there is this hypo area which is causing in the extreme side. With your pointer, can you show us?
Yeah. This here and this here.
Yeah. So two extremes, there is some shadowing
These
over
are
there.
major retinal vessels which are obscuring the signal below it. So you see, if you see this fundus image below, so here when you're reaching this vessel here and this vessel here, so this signal gets obscured somewhat, and this is due to blocked reflection from these arteries, or sorry, blood vessels. Shall I
Yeah.
move on?
Yes, yes, please.
So these are basically various hyporeflective lesions. It could be the defects in the tissue. There is a deficiency of the tissue, or there may be fluid in that, as we saw in the neurosensory detachment or in cystoid macular edema, the presence of fluid, it causes hyporeflectance, or it could be a blocked echogenicity from a major hyperreflective area which is present above, can block the signal below it, so causing hyporeflective lesions. So it's very important applying, because most of the patients we have a diabetic macular edema. So applying OCT to diabetic macular edema. So basically we see 5 types of lesions, 5 types of macular edema in diabetes, and or there may be combinations of this. So one is the sponge-like macular edema. The whole of the retina, the thickness is increased. There are no cystoid spaces. It's just like the sponge, the retina absorbs fluid like a sponge, and the thickness gets increased. And this is a sponge type of sponge-like macular edema. And most of these patients, they do need some kind of laser, or nowadays we even give intravitreal injections for that. But earlier we used to do laser in these types of macular edema. Going to the next type is the cystoid macular edema, as we already discussed. And this type of macular edema in diabetes, it won't be treated with the laser. It needs intravitreal injections in the form of either steroids or anti-VEGF injections. And you see here, these cystoid spaces, this large cystoid spaces are present. These are fluid-filled spaces separated by septae in between. And this you see, this is in the outer layers. This is the outer layer cystoid macular edema. And you may sometimes, what Dr. Saurabh Sinha earlier was talking was, you may get these cystoid spaces in the inner layers also. And those cystoid spaces, then they disrupt the inner layer continuity. And then there's a there is a formation of a disease entity now, which we call DRIL, that is a disorganized retinal inner layers, and which is pathognomonic of ischemia of the inner layers.
So Dr. Kapil Sharma, we got your question finally. This is a question by him. I'll stop here, Sangeet. He had asked what is DRIL. DRIL is to discover retinal intelligence, what he just explained to you. He has asked another question: what is double hump in ARMD on OCT? Double hump in ARMD. What is double hump? Sangeet, anything you're aware of?
Double hump, I don't know, but double layer sign is a sign.
I think he's talking about IPC with what you had said, the double layer sign next to the...
Double layer sign.
Yes.
Next, you must be seeing a small separation between the Brooks membrane and the RPE. You see the RPE splitting into 2 layers. The Brooks membrane and the inner is the RPE.
Yeah. The double hump, double hump they talk about in glaucoma patients. I think the RNF analysis, they talk about double hump over there. So double hump is a word in OCT, but not in retina and glaucoma. Dr. Satyet, I have to take your leave because I'm expected to be on another webinar at 6:30 right now.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
I am sorry for leaving today. Thank you, Sangeet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
We'll continue, Dr. Sangeet.
So the next type of macular edema in diabetes, which we see, is this neurosensory detachments. You can see sometimes, and again, these patients need intravitreal injections. And these neurosensory detachments, they're not unlike CSR. You won't be able to distinguish them on fundus imaging directly, but you can only make these neurosensory detachments on OCT. So the value of OCT is very high in these cases. And you see, this is a combined cystoid macular edema and a neurosensory detachment. And once we give triamcinolone, this usually settles down. And
regarding the neurosensory detachment, Dr. Sangeet,
pardon?
If you can just go back one slide.
Yes.
Sometimes when we have these neurosensory detachments and we have these cystic spaces in diabetic macular edema, in some cases we see clear fluid, clear spaces, and
Yes.
some cases there is this fibrinous kind of a echogenicity inside the fluid. So, so is there any change in the prognosis?
Yes, definitely. It indicates the long-standing neurosensory detachment, and once the disease is long-standing, the prognosis automatically becomes bad. So this indicates the prognosis. You are quite right over there.
So this is an important point that all postgraduates should note, because the internal reflectance of these cystic spaces is also very important for the prognosis. So you can go ahead, please.
So I think discuss this slide. Shall I go ahead further?
Yes, yes, please.
So this is the fourth type of macular edema, that is the vitreofoveal traction, which we are seeing diabetic macular edema changes. We have discussed this earlier also when we discussed the pre-retinal profile. And this type of macular edema needs surgery. And this is the, again, this is the broad type of vitreofoveal traction. And the below one is pre-operative and the above scan is post-operative. And you can see once you have seen that this type of macular edema is present, either injections or the laser won't help much over there. Sometimes in this patient, in fact, we had given intravitreal triamcinolone, and it helped to disengage this membrane and cause and this settle down very nicely. So some patients it may help triamcinolone also, but most of the patients they need surgery if this kind of edema is there. And this is the last type of macular edema which we see on diabetic macular edema patients. You see there is a taut posterior hyaloid and there is an epiretinal membrane present over the retina. And this again needs a surgical intervention. No laser or no injections will help in this type of patient.
Here you can see the blocked, the blockage of the reflexes very well.
Yeah.
The hard exudates are causing so much of shadowing. So this is a very good slide.
Yeah, which cause shadowing.
Yes.
And this is post-surgical, the edema has gone down. So the OCT is very valuable in evaluating diabetic macular edema, and your decision on how depends on that. Coming to the last part, so there are some artifacts also which you may be seeing. So what is this? This is nothing. There's nothing abnormal in this scan. It is just that the eye had been blinked by the patient while we do the scan, and so this blockage is there. This large gap which is there is nothing. This is nothing abnormal. It is just a blink which was there during scan acquisition, and you have to it means that you have to do the scan again. And this you can see again, there is nothing normal. There is this wavy appearance is due to the movement of the eye of the patient while we did the scan. So this is nothing normal here also. So I skipped this scanning tips because I think it's already getting late. I came to this large, I think this is a quiz that I put up for the postgraduates. This particular 2 scans of the same patient, and I think all the profiles that we had discussed, the pre-retinal, the overall retinal, the the macular and the foveal, all are disturbed in this. And I will be very happy if anybody can take a guess on what all abnormalities are present in these scans. You can type in your chat box.
Type in your chat box, starting from pre-retinal to foveal interface, intraretinal.
Last slide, so I'm not going to discuss any further.
We can't see anything in the chat box.
Give them time.
Okay, so Vishak Thomas says that there is an epiretinal membrane. Okay, that is fine. Then you have a pseudo hole. Okay. You have an SRF, the subretinal fluid. Fine. And then you have a pigment epithelial detachment.
Yes.
A lot of things. Yes, correct. Abhilasha says pre-retina, ERM, serous PED. So I think they've been paying attention.
Yes. So one thing I would like to say is whenever you evaluate, you make a pattern to evaluate. You see pre-retinal space, there is an epiretinal membrane. Then you see an overall retinal profile. You see there is a pigment epithelial detachment, and there is a fluid below the retinal pigment epithelium, which has some of these tissues, which indicates that there might be a CNVM below. And then you come to the foveal profile. You see pseudo hole in the above scan, whereas a lamellar type of extension in the lower scan. And then you see that overall retina you see that there is some fluid, intraretinal fluid on both sides of this PED, indicating exudation into the retina now. So this is a CNVM with the epiretinal membrane combined. Diagnosis will be exudative AMD plus epiretinal membrane, and you have to then treat accordingly. I think I have made most of the things clear. I hope, I sincerely hope that you might have gained some things from today's lecture. And again, thank Dr. Satyajit and Dr. Pooja for giving me this chance to teach the postgraduates.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeet. I think it was a beautiful presentation, and the way you anatomically described all the different zones and the clinical abnormalities associated with it. I think the slides were very nice. And just like you, we have been taught when we do fundus fluorescein angiography, we have to tell about the, the different stages, the venous phase, the arterial phase, arteriovenous, just like that. In OCT also, you have to go zone by zone, and that is, and then you will not miss anything at all, because you will be covering all the zones, all the layers, and that will make the your comments very complete. So thank you, Dr. Sangeet. If there, okay, there's one more question from Dr. Subodh. Can you please describe CNVM a bit more? How to identify a CNVM?
Okay. So CNVM, basically, I'm not gone into much detail, but if you go into detail, there are, as we discussed in the AMD part of the lecture, which was taken by Dr. Rupak Kanti Biswas 2-3 days ago. She had said that there are 3 types of CNVM, type 1, type 2, and the RAP lesions, right? So type 1 is limited below the RPE level, and type 2 goes into the intraretinal space. So what we see is CNVM is a hyperreflective structure. So if we see a hyperreflective structure which is causing a pigment epithelial detachment only, and there is no intraretinal fluid, and there is no break in the RPE, or the RPE tissue is still preserved, it's a type 1 CNVM. And if we see that this hyperreflective tissue erodes the RPE, there is a break in the RPE, and then it goes above into the intraretinal space, causing hyperreflectivity in the intraretinal space, and also some kind of fluid or cystoid spaces in the intraretinal space, as these cystoid spaces and the intraretinal fluid is present in this scan. So this indicates a type 2 CNVM. So this is how you will differentiate between a type 1 and type 2 CNVM on OCT.
I think that answers your question very well. There's another question. How do you differentiate drill with retinoschisis, and the difference between CNVM and IPCV?
Yeah, on OCT, if you see a retinoschisis, you will different 2 types of layers. If it is possible for me to go back, I'll just go back a little bit. Okay, so you see this type of presentation. So this is a separation between the inner and the outer retina. You will see in a retinoschisis. But all the layers, you see all the inner layers here. This is an old scan, so it's a time domain scan, so it's not getting a better resolution. But if you see all these inner layers, they are intact. There is no break in the continuity of the inner layers. So this is a retinoschisis. But in drill, what will happen is there will be a break in the continuity of these inner layers. So that will be a drill or disorganized retinal inner layers. They will not be in a continuous pattern. So that is how you differentiate between a drill and a retinostasis.
And with treatment, drill will come back to its normal state. It can reverse. The retinal structures can come back to their normal state.
It can fall back. It can fall back. Even
But
yeah.
Schisis will, that's another difference. That with treatment with anti-VEGF or other treatments, the drill
Need
can
to treat with surgery, and drill you can treat with anti-VEGFs. CNVM and PCV, I think I've discussed. PCV, although it's a classical diagnosis is on ICG angiography, but OCT you have some features. There will be pointed elevated PEDs, there will be a notched PED, and there will be a double layer sign on PEDs. But you have to be very careful in evaluating those scans. You can't see on just one guess that this is a PCV. So this is basically a difference on OCT.
Could you just put in a few words about OCT-A, which has come recently?
OCT-A. You have time?
Just a few things.
If you have time, I'll show you a few slides.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, how can I go back from here and show?
Okay, stop sharing screen. I hope that is okay with the postgraduates for another 10 minutes. You can share your screen again.
Okay. I'll start from here. So now is it coming?
No, you're not sharing your screen yet.
Okay.
I have made you the host, but
Do I have to join in again or?
you're already there.
There? Okay, now I see. Now I just go back to this.
Share screen.
Yeah. Is it now?
Yes.
Okay. So OCT angiography, this is what is come out recently, and it is known as split spectrum amplitude decorrelation angiography. And what happens is like it depends on the principle that you cannot step into. This was a saying by Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who said that you could not step twice into the same river because the waters are ever flowing onto you. So on this same principle, OCT angiography is based. So you see, when you step in the river, the water that is once crossed your feet will not come back. It is the new water that is coming again and again. So what happens in OCT angiography is that flow is detected as variation over time. So what happens is each red blood cell, each column of the red blood cells is taken as a speckle pattern. And this speckle pattern is then reflected back to the probe. And once this speckle pattern moves inside the blood vessels, the movement is detected by the probe. And then you can see the movement of the blood inside the blood vessels. As you see, this is a slow motion camera. So you can see the runner that is running one by one, all steps are being taken. So similarly, what happens is when the speckle pattern of RBC cells, the column of the RBC cells is moving inside the blood vessel, the reflectance comes back and the probe detects the movement, and then you can see that this movement against the static blood vessel walls. So you see, this is a car moving, but the trees are static. So the blood is moving, but the blood vessel wall is static. So you see this speckle pattern from the blood vessel wall will remain the same, whereas the blood column will keep on moving ahead. So you can, in this way, you can make a, you can catch hold that this blood is moving. So blood is used as a dye, which is not injected. It is an intrinsic contrast, and you don't need an extrinsic contrast like fluorescein or indocyanine green to get the picture of the blood moving inside the blood vessels. So this is the basic principle how OCT angiography works. And OCT angiography gives you this C-scan pictures. It is in OCT angiography, there is a SLO image also, which is incorporated into the scan. So SLO image gives you this, you see, as earlier we discussed, OCT gives you just a vertical scan. There is no horizontal scan. But in OCT angiography, you can get this horizontal pictures also, and then you can detect these blood vessel columns on the horizontal sections of the SLO image. So this is an OCT which is incorporated with the SLO. So this picture you see almost similar. This is taken by the fundus fluorescein angiogram. This is OCT. These are not of the same person, but you can see the pattern. You can get almost similar. And on OCT angiography report, what you will see these 4 types of windows on the top, and these 4 types of windows, they will give you the blood vessels in various levels, because OCT, as we studied, can detect in slices, the image in slices of the retina. So the outer choriocapillaries, outer retinal capillaries, then deep capillary plexus. Then there is this window which is of the outer retina, which is devoid of any blood vessels. And on the extreme right this is the window of the choriocapillaries. So these 4 windows you detect, and you can detect the blood flow at various levels, which is not possible with fluorescein angiography, which will only give you an idea of the outer capillary plexus and the a little bit about the choriocapillaries, but it won't give you any idea of the deep capillaries or the outer retinal structures if there is any abnormality in that. So this is an advantage of OCT angiography over FFA.
I think that much may be enough for them for.
That is perfect. Yes.
Yeah, this is the last slide I will show. So you see there is this is CNVM, and on OCT, this is on FFA, and this is on OCT. You can clearly delineate the CNVM. This is a patient of branch retinal artery occlusion. Again, you can make all these structures visible on OCT angiography also, and this is totally non-invasive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's past 20 minutes, 6:30, and we are very, very grateful to Dr. Sangeet Mittal. I have 2 things to say. One, after listening to your presentation, I do not need Dr. Pooja Sinha anymore to tell me about the OCT in the day-to-day OPD. And secondly,
that doesn't sound like a good statement to make.
I don't need help, because now he has made it so clear. He has explained it so nicely that I don't need your help anymore. And the second thing I wanted to say is that you started your talk by saying you have not taught the postgraduates ever. I think this particular talk will get the maximum hits on YouTube and
Yes,
Facebook.
I'm sure.
Because the way you have taught, if any of the postgraduates who have not attended today, I mean, they have missed a world. What an amazing presentation you have made. And people can listen to this again and again and make their fundas about OCT clear. It was a beautiful presentation. Very nice. You have very nicely done it. And I think you should get into teaching now, the postgraduate.
Vilasha says, awesome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for the entire week that you were with us. So many obstacles happened of joining, not joining, but we are trying to put our heart and soul into this PG program. Every day, so many problems happen, but the postgraduates have also supported us, and the moderators and the speakers have supported us to make this program successful. A big thanks to you for the entire week, and especially for today for the amazing presentation you have made. Thank you so much, and thank you all the postgraduates for staying with us until now. And from Monday, we will start glaucoma now for the next 7 days. So we'll see you on Monday. I'll send you the details on the WhatsApp group. I've already sent it, but the timing I'll send again. Thank you so much once again.
Thank
Thank you,
sir.
everybody.
Thank you,
Goodbye
Peter.
and good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
postgraduates. Thank you.
Mama!